Now, Russia's president may be regarded with suspicion in the West, but here you can see him shaking hands with India's Prime Minister, sealing trade agreements worth about $25 billion. Now, from now on, Russia's grip on India's oil imports, refining, and even the end product sold at the petrol station will be much stronger. And as Adefemi Akinsanya reports, it looks like Moscow has driven a shrewd bargain.
India and Russia were close allies during the Cold War. Recently, their bond has been tested by their differing global alliances. But the two countries seem to be putting those differences aside.
An old friend is better than two new friends.
Russia will pay $12.9 billion for a controlling stake of debt-laden Indian oil major Essar Group, the largest domestic acquisition by a foreign company. The deal is a big one for Russia, allowing it to control a vast chunk of India's oil market. A thorn in the side for Middle Eastern producers Saudi and Iran, who are both vying for the business.
This is not just an effort on the part of Russia to gain access to a key market in itself, but also the wider region and also the capability to use the alliance with India to forge expanding alliances elsewhere in Asia.
Russia needs to supply oil as much as India needs energy and arms. Military equipment worth almost $11 billion from Moscow will go a long way to strengthening India's arsenal and economy. This includes 200 helicopters and S-400 anti-aircraft missile systems.
Russia is not only supplying military equipment and ordnance, but is also opening joint production of the most modern military equipment.
The deals are aimed at boosting India's energy security while giving Russia access to the second fastest growing oil consumer. But it appears that Russia has walked away from the table in a far stronger position. Adefemi Akinsanya, TRT World.
Well, let's look at this story more closely now with our editor-at-large, Craig Kapitas. He joins us from Paris. You know, Craig, when you take a cursory look over at Russia, you think they're on the brink of recession, they're running out of money and so on, especially because of the low energy prices. Where are they getting all the money from to make deals of this size?
Well, Russia has always been on the brink of recession since the country was founded. Where are they getting all this money? Well, that's a real good question, Matthew, because remember the sanctions that were supposed to dry up the Russian economy and bring them to the table and make them friends with the West? Look, the experts say that Russia has about $450 billion in hard currency reserves, and more experts even say they were supposed to go broke by January of this year. Well, they're certainly not going broke. Russia is involved in a global economic expansion to checkmate American and EU power abroad and create their new alliances. That's what's going on here, and the EU and the United States, with all their talk of sanctions and enforcement, haven't done a darned thing to stop this expansionism.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it, Craig? As you see other countries, China, India, and others, fast growing, the West doesn't really have the same power and control as it once did. Let's talk about the sanctions that you mentioned there. So they're proving essentially ineffectual. What were they designed to do, and what's happening with them?
Well, the Russians were not supposed to be able to make any long-term loans in the EU. There was supposed to be no imports of material that could have dual use for civilian and military operations. There was supposed to be no oil industry equipment brought into Russia, which Russia has been getting through third parties anyway, and we'll get more with this deal down there. And the great irony of all this, Matthew, is that Russia's 5 top export earners categorized as the most money to the least amount of money they get, it's crude oil, refined oil, natural gas, coal, and raw aluminum. And with the exception of coal, all the technology and know-how to do Arctic drilling, deep water drilling, drilling in tough locations, was handed to them on a platter by Western oil companies back in the 90s, only to have those Western oil companies be kicked out of the scene by the Kremlin.
That's right.
What's going on here is remarkable in that you look at the summit down in Goa, the BRICS summit. The U.S. and the EU were outliers there. Back in the day, back in the day, the 80s and the 90s, if Russia was somewhere, you would have American and/or at the time European officials at the table.
Right. Okay.
And now,
Craig, you know,
and now they're not even the. Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. We're actually just going to move on to the BRICS summit in just a moment. Craig, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow, no doubt, on the show. Thanks for your analysis.